depending on how many people you have in your household, about 12 minutes to fill it out. So most people are gonna get an invitation in the mail that way. So as a journalist, if someone told me 95% of the people were gonna be reached some way, I would wanna know well, what about the other 5%, what's up with that? And the answer to that is most people who aren't reached that way have a PO box. And it's really important to know that the census tracks by address. So it's really important that they do it that way. So people with a PO box, it won't be sent to a PO box. It will be sent to your actual address. And if they can't reach it that way, they'll send people out in the field if they realize they aren't getting responses from places that that are on the map, so to speak, as a residential or places where we believe people are actually living. Another part of that subset is people that are living in natural disaster areas. And something that I found really interesting, I covered the census a little bit as a journalist, but I certainly was not an expert. I don't consider myself an expert still, although I've learned a lot in the last couple of months. Census actually starts in January or February. They go out to what I call far-flung places like Alaska and northern Maine, places that they know they're gonna have trouble reaching people to begin with, and they actually go out and start the count earlier there. So I found that to be pretty interesting. So, okay, so you're gonna get an invitation in March. Well, what if you don't respond? It's a very good question. One thing about the census is it's very persistent. It doesn't take no for an answer at all. It will send you a couple of reminders that you've been given an invitation to fill out the census. You can also do it by phone, and if you don't respond at a certain time, you will get one in the mail, an actual form. And if you still haven't responded, then the field workers will start coming out. So the actual official day, Census Day, is April 1st, but it's a misnomer. A lot of people think that they have to fill out the form on April 1st, and you can understand why people would think that, but that's not true. You could fill out the form as soon as you get the invitation, or as soon as it's available online, and there'll be plenty of publicity about this in March. Right now, I'm just trying to lay the groundwork and get people thinking about it. But you could fill it out before April 1st. Sometime around late April, if after a number of reminders, if you have not filled it out, that's when the field workers go out in the field and start knocking on doors to get people to do it. I just like to stop and say, for most of us, for me, for example, filling out the census is going to be pretty easy. I have one house. You know, my situation is easy to fill out. It takes about 12 minutes to do this online. I encourage everyone who has this, it's easy for them to do it, because there are people that are going to be hard to count for a lot of different reasons. They may be, quite frankly, they may be here illegally. They may be afraid of the government beyond what people's most reasonable expectations of fearing the government are. Quite frankly, it could be that they could have a child who's living in two places and they're not really sure how the child should be counted, and I can go over that. So the more we could get the people who are easy to count counted, the more the census, when it has to go out in the field, can concentrate on what are going to be what we call hard to count cases. So that will start in late April. Tied to the citizenship question to some degree was the question of confidentiality. And I'm here to tell you that the census is totally confidential. Not only can the census not share the information with the public, it can't share it with other federal agencies. So it's not to the public, can't even share with other federal agencies. To do so, a person that is caught offending that faces a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This basically says who's likely to fill out the census. I personally think this is overly optimistic. I actually think we're gonna have a little bit more trouble on this. Basically what it says is younger people are it's harder to get younger people to fill out. But I would just say, not to paint a very dire picture here, but you know, we only do this every 10 years, and over the last 10 years, people concerns about cybersecurity has grown, and people's trust in the government, except for this board, I hope, has waned a lot. A lot of people don't have the trust in government that they used to. So I think we're facing some tough sledding here in terms of filling things out. I also want to stop and say this, because this is a very important point, that children are historically dramatically undercounted in the census. And the reason for that, there's really two reasons. If you're filling out this form and you have a 9-month-old by your side, you may think, well, this doesn't pertain to my 9-month-old. I'm just going to fill it out for the adults in the family, and you can see why someone would maybe think that way, but it's the wrong way to think, because everyone should be counted. The second reason is just basically people do not like to give out information about their children to anyone, including the government. But it's really important if we were talking about parks, and if there's going to be a new park in Pine Plains, there's probably going to be a grant application at some point to try to get some county or federal or state matching money for that. And again, on that grant, I can guarantee there's going to be information asking how many people live in Pine Plains, and then the dollars that you get will be somewhat determined by that population. So I'm wrapping up here. This is the Complete Count Committee. Again, it's a very diverse committee and a very good committee. I could talk. I know a lot of these people. I covered a lot of these people for a very long time. In some cases, I've gotten to know them. I know them in a very short time, in the last, say, year or 2 or 3 years. But some people on this list I've covered for about 20 years, and I know they do great work. And I could sit here for a long time and glow about their work, but I do want to say, if we rely on this committee to do all the work, we're going to be unsuccessful. And that I view this as kind of a human spider web, where it's that old commercial: he tells 2 people and you tell 2 people, and so on and so on and so on. And that's the way it goes. People inevitably trust certain people more than others. There are people that, for example, I don't want to put it on the town board, but I will a little bit, that there are people in this town that don't know me, that maybe would like to trust me, but not sure if they should trust me, but they trust you. They voted for you. They gave you something very sacred. They get very personal. They decided to vote for you. So I always urge at this time, all the elected officials to do what they can to push, this information out to them. And that's true for all of you. Every one of you have neighbors that trust you, and it's really important to talk about the census and how important it is to the community. So I will end on this little note, which is, and we can make this. I could get this to you in various ways, but there is a website on the county website that we're keeping all the information. It has basically this PowerPoint. It has all the outreach that we're doing. It has upcoming meetings that we're doing, and there's also, you can email me at completecount@dutchessny.gov. I have direct access to that account. I do want to let you know that when I went through that committee, there are certain groups that are on there and certain groups that aren't on there. I'll give you an example. We have the Interfaith Council on that meeting as an umbrella way of reaching all faith-based organizations. So I view like that whole committee as, each committee is basically a subcommittee unto themselves. The library system is on that committee, and I've already spoken to the Mid-Hudson Library System, and they are fully on board with this. They're going to be, they'll have, in most cases, I can't speak for Pine Plains, I do know that they're on board, but in many of the towns, there'll be a dedicated computer for people who need help filling out the census, and we're going to be talking about that. Next Friday, I'm speaking before through BOCES, all the school superintendents, because that's going to be hugely important to get information out. It's kind of a 2-track strategy there. We want to certainly have the kids get some instruction and understand why this is important, and then we want the kids to somehow make sure that information goes home to the parents, and the children tell the parents how important it is to their community as another way. So we're really going at this from every conceivable angle, every angle I can think of, quite frankly. So with that, I will stop, and if you have any questions, I'll take questions. I can take questions of the public if you're okay with that. It's totally up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
What are you using for your initial mailing list? Where are you getting the names and addresses for your initial list?
Oh, okay, yeah, the census has that information, and a lot of it, actually, it emanates from, at some point, the town, was, I would assume, was contacted by the county planning department, for information on, any new residents, new subdivisions, and and so what the county does, they use and I'm not the technical expert on this, but they use an overlay system. So for example, parcel access has a lot of information. Parcel access, in theory, should tell us where all the residents and residential areas or units are in Dutchess County, but it won't tell you if a house has been, divided, and is it, our grandparents living there now? It doesn't tell you the number of people living there, but that's why it's important that the census does track by address, but it by no means knows at this point how many people are living there.
But I mean, you've got 911 addresses.
That's right, that's good, another good example.
But take our town center, most people use a PO box.
Right,
So,
but most people use a PO box, but they still have a mailing address.
For certain purposes, right?
This is gonna be one of those purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if they,
They can use both if they